Seltzer Kings
podcasts.
This episode is brought to you by CBS. DMV is a brand new workplace comedy turning misery into magic and chaos into comedy. Starring Harriet Dyer and Tim Meadows, DMV is here to serve you laughs. Watch Mondays at 8:30, 7:30 Central on CBS and streaming on Paramount+.
Getting ready to step into your career era? Set yourself apart with Adobe Creative Cloud Pro for students. Hone your skills with apps like Photoshop, Illustrator, Premiere Pro, and more, powered with the latest in creative AI. Students save over 55%, so you can build a portfolio you're proud of. Launch your future with Adobe Creative Cloud Pro for students. Visit adobe.com/students to learn more.
Welcome, pretties! To the What the Hell Were You Thinking Spooktacular 2025. 99 problems, but a witch. 8-1.
All I'm saying is, Gavin, your guys' postal clerks do some weird stuff. You should keep an eye on them.
Yes. The following podcast contains...
You used to be a kind, loving man, and now you're a foul-mouthed monster.
explicit language.
Hello and welcome to the podcast that asks a simple question. When you claimed it was your turn to lead the spell circle and you knew that it wasn't your turn, what the hell were you thinking, Quintessentia? I'm your host, Dave Bledsoe, and this is episode number 511, Something Wiccan This Way Comes edition of the show. It is part 3 of Spooktacular 2025, where we talk about modern witches. Stay tuned. What the Hell You Thinking podcast is brought to you by Coven Finders, because spells are better together. Are you a practicing Wiccan looking for other practicing Wiccans for comradeship and spellcrafting? Do you live in a place that frowns on alternative faith practice and considers your religion demonic? Are you tired of chanting in Zoom meetings? Then you need Coven Finders. Our secure app connects you with other Wiccans in your area. All members are vetted by the Earth Mother Society team to ensure they are who they say they are, not horny dudes looking to see you skyclad. Coven Finders, because a coven of one isn't a coven at all, really.
Today, in England, witchcraft and its more modern incarnation, Wicca, are pagan religions. Wiccans worship the gods and spirits of nature. In return for their faith, the spirits grant them the power of magic. It was this power that first drew Alyson Hannigan to Wicca. Now, she's studying to become a full-fledged witch.
I like the name witch, and I suppose in a way I'd like to reclaim it as being a good word and standing for all the things that I believe in.
She has her husband's complete support, though he has no interest in witchcraft himself. She knows others will not be so accepting.
Most of my long-term listeners know that I grew up with very religious parents.
You've mentioned it.
Looking back on my life, I'm certain that I never really believed in their faith. I just didn't know there was an option not to believe. But that doesn't mean it was easy to become an atheist. First of all, atheists are not well liked.
Godless heathens.
Survey after survey finds atheists the least trusted and most disliked group in America. Some 40% of Americans find us despicable. Honestly, when the Muslims surpassed us as the most disliked religious group in the country in 2017, I felt like we atheists had lost our edge and we needed to try just a little bit harder. But back in the early 90s, I did have a lot of trouble with the idea that I didn't believe in anything, so I started sampling some of the other religions and talking to people about their faith.
I find myself harboring a perhaps rather controversial opinion
that the overwhelming majority of people who say they are religious are entirely full of shit. With notable exceptions, mainly Orthodox Jews, Mormons, and a rather large number of Muslims, people are mostly whatever religion their parents was and rarely have ever attended church. Indeed, the average American doesn't even think about religion at all, except when someone dies or they go through some sort of personal trauma. have a doctor mention the word cancer, and Bob, who hasn't been to church since his confirmation, is now all about talking to God. And if I were God, I'd be like,
new phone. Who dis?
The Catholics are the absolute worst of the lot. Every damn one of them I spoke with went to church maybe on Christmas if their parents were in town, and all of them were sinning like premarital sex was going out of style. Although these days I hear it is, I worry about Gen Z. The only faith that I found really embraced their church were the evangelicals.
Oh, them.
Yeah. They weren't in it for the faith, fellowship, and good works and eternal reward in the kingdom of God. They were in it because their preachers promised them that they would get paid in this world. Also because their faith told them they were so much better than everyone else. Scratch a committed evangelical, and just beneath the surface, you'll find a insecure, petty, thin-skinned cunt that needs the affirmation of their peers to feel important and will stomp on anyone to validate their beliefs.
Why don't you tell us how you really feel?
Of all the faiths that I looked into during that period of my life, there was only one who could not give a fuck about what others thought of them. They were just going to be themselves, and that was the Wiccans. Which brings me to this week's topic for part 3 of Spooktacular 2025, Modern Witchcraft, or as they call themselves, Wiccans. What are Wiccans? Well, they would tell you they are a neo-pagan religion based on ancient Celtic traditions, and the rest of us would say they are a bunch of goth kids who decided to take being goth to the next level. So, let's talk about them. But first, we got to talk about the Romans.
Roman.
Specifically about the Roman conquest of Britain from roughly CE 44 to CE 87.
I'm going to need more details, man.
Britannia, as it was known to the Romans, was an almost mythical land, full of monsters, magic, and big-titty warrior queens. Which, if you're a woman with large breasts, you already know ain't a real thing, because shooting a bow or lobbing a spear is a lot easier without them big old biddies blocking up your shot.
All men are perverted pigs.
Julius Caesar landed troops on the island 100 years before, but was turned back by some big-titty warrior queens, and the logistical difficulties of keeping an army supplied across the English Channel kept them out. So, when Rome was at the peak of its power, Romans did what they did best. They played the long game, threw some money into the mix, and built up their infrastructure so they could send serious forces over and fuck shit up. Emperor Claudius finally rolled enough troops, money, and diplomatic fuckery into the mix and managed to effectively conquer the island by CE 61 when he put down Boudicca's rebellion. Boudica was a warrior queen with realistically sized boobs. And while the Romans held most of the island, there were problematic sections that simply refused to bend the knee to Rome, largely centered in modern Wales.
I'm not a Mick. I'm bloody Welsh!
The Celts that lived there were stubbornly refusing to surrender and were commonly believed to be led by their druids.
In ancient times, hundreds of years before the dawn of history, lived a strange race of people. Druids.
Druids, who we know very little about, and what little we do know was written entirely by Romans, who had a long history of, shall we say, exaggerating the worst qualities of their enemies. And it weren't that the Druids were the leaders of the Celts in unpacified Britain. That was their tribal chiefs, but the Druids were the religious leaders, and Rome understood that religion was the way to grab a conquered people by the balls and squeezed until they submitted. From Druidry.com, quote, "The Druids filled a highly esteemed and vital role in Celtic society. They acted as both lawmakers and law enforcers, presided over sacrifice and religious functions, kept the history, mythology, and law system alive through memory and oral tradition, taught the youth, and influenced the nobility. It's no wonder they posed such a threat to the Romans," unquote. So it was that after years of fighting in Wales, the Romans had pushed the rebellious tribes and their Druidic leaders onto a small island off the coast, which is called Anglesey today. The Romans, vastly outnumbering their opponents, did what Romans do. They put everyone to the sword, burned down their sacred groves, and eradicated the tribes and their Druid priests, and ended the ancient tribal system of societies in the British Isles. And for 3 centuries, Roman society dominated Britannia, scouring the old political and religious systems from the islands. The only places where the Celtic beliefs remained at all were in the Highlands of Scotland.
Trouble with Scotland is that it's full of Scots.
And of course, the Romans never conquered Ireland.
Come out, you black and tan, come out and fight me like a man. Show your wife how you won medals down in Flanders. Tell her how the IRA made you run like hell away from the green and lovely lanes of Killishandra.
That, of course, required something else, the Christian church, which rolled in, and by the time of the fall of the Western Roman Empire, the old culture had either been forgotten or assimilated.
Your culture will adapt to service us. Resistance is futile.
The old pagan religion's lore and beliefs were basically gone. And the reason I'm telling you all this now is you need to keep this very much in mind as I explain Wicca for the next half hour or so. So you're asking again, what is Wicca?
Learn to weave a wicker basket with this kit by Traditional Craft Kits.
No, not Wicca. I suppose the best people to answer this are the Wiccans themselves. From WiccanLiving.com, quote, Wicca is a modern, earth-centered religion with its roots in ancient practices of our shamanic ancestors. Its practitioners, who call themselves Wiccans, honor the life-giving and life-sustaining powers of nature through ritual worship and commitment to living in balance with the earth. Wicca is technically classified as one of many pagan religions, though not all Wiccans would identify as pagans, unquote.
Still not getting it.
Okay, let's try it this way then. In 1954, a couple of Brits, one of them named Gerald and the other named Doreen, introduced Wicca to the world. This was done via a book aptly named Witchcraft Today, which Gerald, a retired civil servant and amateur anthropologist and archaeologist, wrote. It was a non-fiction book.
Allegedly.
About a cult of witches he had met in England in the 1930s. It also contains quite a bit about the Knights Templars, fairies, and a race of pygmy humanoids that lived alongside human beings.
Right, like hobbits or something.
Doreen was decades younger than Gerald and had worked as a codebreaker in Bletchley Park during World War II and considered herself a practicing witch from her early teens. Doreen created most of the religious elements of Wicca, while Gerald gave it a grounding in history. A history that, according to Gerald, that said the witch panics that were a coordinated effort to wipe out all traces of a pagan witch cult that spanned back to pre-Roman Europe, rather than all the reasons we discussed last week. A theory that was actually thoroughly discredited by the time Gerald wrote the book. How did a book about ancient witches become a religion? That's where Doreen came in. Gerald formed a group of like-minded folks into his first coven, and Doreen was one of the members. The group, already steeped in esoteric magic, right and left-hand paths, Rosicrucianism, and other hokum, began to embrace Gerald's thinking on ancient magic, and Doreen began crafting a liturgy for them to follow when the coven met. What came out of those explorations became the central tenets of the Wiccan faith. Again, from Wicca Living, quote, the deities of Wicca are the goddess and god, who are feminine and masculine essences of an all-encompassing life force responsible for all of creation, including the cycles of life and death on Earth. Wiccans believe that these deities are multifold in the sense that they are a duotheistic religion rather than a traditionally monotheistic religion like Christianity. The god and goddess are worshipped at regular intervals throughout the year. Festivals emphasizing the masculine are known as sabbats, corresponding with the Earth's position relative to the sun. They include the solstices, the equinoxes, and the 4 cross-quarter days that fall between the solar points. Some Wiccans divide these sabbats into major and minor. The minor sabbats are the solstices and equinoxes, while the majors are the remaining 4, which most famously include Samhain, celebrated today in the United States as Halloween. The goddess, on the other hand, is worshipped every full moon, and these holidays are called Esbats.
Alrighty then.
Finally, the Wiccans would very much like you to know that they are not Satanist. Indeed, they don't believe in the devil at all, and they are strong prohibitions against using magic for evil purposes. The threefold law. The short version of that is that any spell that you cast comes back on you, the witch, 3 times as strong. So, if you use it for magic for evil, it will come back and...
That can really bite you in the ass.
Wicca came into the world just as the countercultural movement of the 1960s began to coalesce. As the boomer generation began to look around for new and exciting ways to piss off their parents, one of these places was in new religions. By the mid-1960s, a small but active community of witches was well established in England, Australia, and the United States. By the 1970s, the granola-crunching class, always on the lookout for a back-to-the-land ideas, found Wicca's earth-centered dogma highly appealing, not to mention Wicca's view on sex and sexuality.
Right. I've sat through mercy and I've sat through forgiveness. Finally, we get to the good stuff. Oh.
Doreen was the one to bring sexuality into Wicca. She wrote in her book, The Charge of the Goddess, quote, "And ye shall be free from slavery. And as a sign that you are really free, ye shall be naked in your rights, and you shall dance, sing, feast, make music, and love, all in my praise. Let my worship be within the heart that rejoiceth, and behold, all acts of love and pleasure are my rituals, unquote. Yeah, of course, Doreen had to write it in the King James Version of the Bible style. This meant that many rituals are done in what the Wiccans call Skyclad, and what the rest of us would call...
I was just naked just then and very nude.
As Wiccan considers itself a fertility religion, the act of sex is also symbolically and literally woven into many of the rituals. From a website called Wicca for Beginners, quote, phallus is the Latin for penis, and it is a generative force in nature. Yonic is the ancient Sanskrit word for vagina or womb, and it is the receptive force in nature. The meaning of these two symbols is displayed in part of the Wiccan ritual called the Great Rite. The most common form of a Great Rite is performed symbolically. The ritual knife is plunged into the ritual chalice. This is symbolic sex, not just the physical sex act, but the union of opposites, which represents the creative forces in the universe. The Great Rite is usually performed symbolically in Wiccan rituals, but not always. In some covens, the high priest and high priestess may perform the actual Great Rite during the ritual. The high priest and high priestess are usually involved couple, and it's also generally performed in private. Other ritual participants exit, or there is a private place prepared for the rite, unquote. Credit where credit is due, Wicca is not a cult. I mean, yes, it is a cult in the strictest sense, but not in the Flavor Aid jungle compound sense. The founders of the religion were not interested in earthly power over their adherents. There was no head witch in charge, and each coven is self-governing and largely egalitarian. There's no financial element to practicing Wicca. You don't need to buy anything special to conduct a rite. The spice aisle at Walmart can provide 75% of what you need. And all things considered, Wicca is a safe, accepting religion, which puts it far ahead of many of the more mainline faiths. Wicca is open to all flavors of human sexuality and has become popular in the LGBTQ communities to the point that it is considered by outsiders as a lesbian thing. But that is largely the fault of pop culture. It's not a sex cult, though it is sex and body positive, and bad actors have used Wicca as a tool for recruitment and abuse coven members, but the tenets of the faith are structured in such a way that the acts are predicated first upon the consent of those performing the rituals. More from Wicca from Beginners. Quote, this doesn't mean that every Wiccan chooses to be sexually active or to have multiple sex partners. Some still opt for abstinence and celibacy, or they reserve sex for serious relationships. Everyone must make their own choices about their own bodies. There is no wrong decision. Sexual activities are not decisions that should be taken lightly. Just because Wiccans have open and progressive attitudes towards sex, it should not be assumed that it means we think anything goes. Wicca's key tenets are finding a healthy balance in life and taking personal responsibility for oneself. Sex may be natural, but nature can be exploited and misused, unquote. Wicca remained a very niche religion for most of its history, centered around communities where alternative was very much mainstream. Artist colonies, hippie havens, and neighborhoods in large cities. Even today, the best guesstimates place the number of practicing Wiccans somewhere around 800,000 worldwide, largely centered in the UK and the US, though that number is highly speculative. The 2021 UK census only had 13,000 self-identified Wiccans, alongside some 74,000 self-identified pagans. And there's every reason to believe that those numbers are down considerably from its high points, which peaked out in the early 2000s, when Wicca was at its peak. Why, I hear you ask, was Wicca suddenly so popular back then?
Imagine a world where every word ever written, every picture ever painted, and every film ever shot could be viewed instantly in your home via an information superhighway.
Unlike the modern internet, the early web was a diverse set of tiny collectives, all finding like-minded people and creating small digital communities on message boards, Usenet groups, and chat channels. And the Wiccan community embraced online culture early and enthusiastically. It was in the digital domain that I examined the precepts of Wicca during my search for faith. You know what I found?
A cynical, angst-ridden goth girl.
No. I mean, yes, but no. I found a community of welcoming, kind people searching for togetherness who also happen to like spooky shit. In their corner of the web, Wiccans traded spells, passed on secrets, scheduled in real-life meetups, and generally supported one another in a truly wholesome manner in accordance with the tenets of their faith. If a dude, such as myself, came into the group and was respectful and kind, they were included in the community. And while I never dated anyone from Wiccan website, a lot of people met and got married via the connections they made on those early online hubs. And then along came Hollywood. Witchcraft, long a horror movie staple, had been rehabilitated in schlocky comedy by Bewitched, but it was a movie, The Craft, that did more than anything to kick witches into the pop culture back in the 1990s.
To the other kids at St. Bernard Academy, they were the girls who didn't belong.
Whatever you do, stay away from them.
Why?
They're witches.
But after years of being on the outside,
Why'd you lie about me?
I don't want to go out with you again. Please, stop begging. It's pathetic.
4 girls are about to discover the dark side.
You ever heard of invoking the spirit?
Black magic. We can make things happen. I mean, this is it. This is real.
Columbia Pictures welcomes you to the Witching Hour.
For all the movie, The Craft purported to have an actual Wiccan consulting on it, it largely remade witches and the demon-loving black magic badasses of history. But the actresses were hot, and they made magic look cool, and that brought attention onto Wicca. Practical Magic, a different kind of movie, gave a different version of the first, of the faith, one a little bit closer to what a Wiccan would call accurate-ish. Sabrina the Teenage Witch was, well, a teenage witch. The Hollowell Sisters of Charm brought Wicca to the 90210 set, and of course Buffy the Vampire Slayer made witches look good and lovely, except of course for when they go bad and start flaying people and killing a lot of guys. All of this attention on Wicca brought a lot of people who didn't actually respect it as an actual religion and focused entirely on the sex and magic. And when those people discovered that the Wiccans were serious about both of those things, and it wasn't just an excuse to dress in slutty goth attire and chant in a circle on Halloween, those people kind of recoil. In a lot of corners of America, the dumber corners, there was pushback, bringing up all the tired old bullshit about the devil and demonic influence. Couple this with the evangelicals getting on their panties in a twist about Harry Potter, and pop culture pulled back from its infatuation with the Wiccans, which suited the Wiccans just fine. Also, a lot of the new adherents to the faith that came into it via the early internet, frankly, just aged out. It was fun at 15 to study, fantastic at 21 to feel empowered in a women-centric environment, pushing back against the patriarchy with ritual magic, but at 30, with a job and maybe a kid or two, no one had the time to keep a coven running and the numbers shrank. There is still a healthy internet witch community out there, much like it was in the early days of the webs, but they're older, more serious, and more focused and much quieter about being Wiccan. If it sounds like I admire, even like Wiccans, I do. Of all the neo-pagan faiths out there, Wicca is the least susceptible to corruption. Because when I hear someone talk about being a pagan in the Norse tradition, I start backing up slowly because there's a decent chance they're going to be dropping some Nazi shit real soon. Unlike the Satanists, I don't see Wiccans as in it for the lols, as the kids used to say. LaVeyans aside, who are way too serious about their shit, most Satanists are looking for a reaction, which is fine, even cool, but you shouldn't take it seriously as a religion. A true practicing Wiccan is 100% sincere in their beliefs that those beliefs grant them actual magical powers, and that is where I part ways with the Wiccans. Because, come on, really?
This won't end well.
There is no such thing as magic. The same way there's no such thing as transubstantiation, the rapture, the kingdom of heaven, angels, demons, that Joseph Smith read some gold plates using a rock and a hat, or that Xenu transported alien souls to Earth in 737s and dumped them in volcanoes, which he then nuked. The very idea that there is some mystical force in the universe that can be invoked by burning some herbs and chanting in the nude is utterly absurd. On top of this, the conceit, and it is a conceit, that you are in possession of some sort of ancient knowledge passed down through a British postal clerk, which is what Gerald was, is equally risible. The Romans eradicated the Celtic religions in the 1st century CE, and 2,000 years of Christianity did for any lingering traces of that knowledge. All that remains of those religions are a few saints co-opted from those traditions and a smattering of holidays primarily centered around fun things for the kids. As we learned in the first episodes, oral traditions require a lot of work to pass down information generationally, and it does not take much to break that chain, and the Romans broke that chain real good about 2,000 years ago. The Druids are gone. The pagan religions are utterly subsumed into Christianity, and whatever it is you think you are doing when your coven gets together for the great rite, it ain't what they were doing 2 millennia back. And that is why I'm not a Wiccan.
Really, I couldn't tell.
Still, do like them. If I had a choice between a Wiccan and a priest, I'm going to have witches every time. The neighborhood children are a lot safer for one thing, and frankly, he doesn't look good in black. Not gonna lie, sexy Wiccan witches are my type, and if I get invited to an S-spot by the right witch, I'm willing to put aside my skepticism in the interest of being a good guest and frolicking naked in the moonlight glade with half a dozen true believers, because blessed be, y'all, blessed be.
This episode is brought to you by Paramount Plus. Paramount Plus has movies. So many movies. The movies you've seen 1,000 times and could watch 1,000 more. Iconic movies your friends can't believe you haven't seen. New movies, classic movies, new takes on classic movies. So whether you're into Top Gun or The Naked Gun, Mean Girls or Mission Impossible, Smurfs or Sonic the Hedgehog, there's a mountain of movies to discover on Paramount Plus. Start streaming today.
Adobe Acrobat Studio, so brand new. Show me all the things PDFs can do. Do your work with ease and speed. PDF Spaces is all you need. Do hours of research in an instant with key insights from an AI assistant. Pick a template with a click. Now your prezzo looks super slick. Close that deal? Yeah, you won. Do that, doing that, did that, done. Now you can do that with Acrobat. Now you can do that with the all-new Acrobat. It's time to do your best work with the all-new Adobe Acrobat Studio.
That is it for the show this week. Look, if you're a Wiccan listening and I have offended you, I genuinely am sorry. Like I said, I like Wiccans, and your criticism that I didn't actually address the deeper tenets of the faith, explore the actual role of the ritual, and just made jokes and talked about how hot you are both accurate and fair. But this isn't a podcast about Wicca. It's a podcast where I make jokes about things and impart a very little bit of knowledge. If you're tempted to cast a spell on me, don't bother. First of all, magic isn't real. Second, threefold law. And third of all, a curse, if it were cast on me, given my life, I wouldn't even notice it. Speaking of noticing things, rate and review the show. It helps others take a listen and wonder how they went so long without noticing it before going back to not noticing it. And now that we have covered the Wiccans, we are down to the last of our little witch's brew. The modern version of the Village Wise Woman, wrapped up with the Wiccans and the Granny Witches of Appalachia, which was where we will pick up next week for the finale of Spooktacular 2025. So you need to kick us $1 at patreon.com/whatthehellpodcast. We'll use that money to buy beer for S-Bots, which is actually just me sitting around in the studio drinking beer. Do all the things Jeremy tells you to do in the closing credits, otherwise he will not reimburse us for our cleaning fees after we perform the Great Rite. It got really sticky in here last time. And so for me, Dave, I put a spell on you because you're mine, Bledsoe. Producer.
That seems like it would invoke the threefold law, but again, there is no such thing as witches.
Gavin, and all the fictional members of our Wiccan coven, we want to say that we talk about witches, but never wizards. Wizards should get some love, and we'll see you all next week for the finale of Spooktacular 2025.
Stop the things you do. Stop the things you do. I'm not lying.
What the Hell Were You Thinking stars Dave Bledsoe and features Gavin St. James and several fictional minions. The show is produced by Kimberly Steele and a part of the Seltzer Kings podcast network. You can find more information on the show on their website, whatthehellpodcast.com, or on Facebook as What the Hell Podcast. Thanks for listening.
I have no ending for this, so I take a small bow.
So, got a new Tale from the Holler.
Seltzer Kings.
Podcasts.